The manuscript known as The Watsons is the substantial portion of a novel begun and abandoned by Jane Austen. 68 pages of closely written and revised text, it represents the earliest surviving draft of a novel by her in process of composition. It is especially precious because apart from 2 discarded chapters of Persuasion, we have no surviving manuscripts of any of the 6 famous novels. The paper on which the manuscript is written bears a watermark of 1803, and the manuscript was probably composed in Bath in 1804-5 when Jane Austen was in her late 20s. Jane Austen left the manuscript untitled. It was given the title The Watsons by her nephew, James Edward Austen Lee, in 1871, more than 50 years after Jane Austen died. And it was at this time in 1871 that he published it. The manuscript is a working draft, written in a neat, tight hand, filled with deletions and revisions, and from it we can see something rare and precious, Jane Austen's process of composition. We can see how she develops character, how she develops plot incidents, especially how she works with minute detail, altering just a tiny word to get a phrase exactly right, and above all, how economic her art is, how she pares away excess of information. The manuscript itself is formed of a series of small homemade booklets, 8 pages each, made by cutting down and folding larger sheets of paper. As a physical artifact, it offers a rare opportunity to see what was probably Jane Austen's usual method of preparing a manuscript surface. Her preference was for writing on small pages, which she filled to the very edges. These small pages vividly demonstrate her famously economic art. Because she leaves no room for extensive revision or deletion, where she does want to expand a section or write something new, she literally applies patches to the manuscript, a piece of paper cut and tailored precisely to the space it's meant to cover, and a pin to patch it to the space. The booklets themselves give the impression of a novel growing from tiny book to tiny book beneath the author's hand. The novel tells the story of Emma Watson, adopted in childhood by a rich aunt and uncle, and now recently returned to her birth family, a family consisting of her sick clergyman father and her 3 unmarried sisters. The story itself is full of possibilities. Emma's desperate sisters anxious to marry, the poverty in which she finds herself after her earlier upbringing, and the real possibility that her father will soon die and leave the family in even greater deprivation. She also, intriguingly, has an early suitor in this part of the novel, a Darcy-like, awkward, arrogant aristocrat, Lord Osborne. Why did Jane Austen abandon the novel? One possibility is that in early 1805, circumstances in her own life came too close to the circumstances she was describing in fiction. In January 1805, her father died, plunging her own small female family into even greater poverty. Perhaps the stark situation she found herself in was too uncomfortably close to the event she was describing in the novel. One other possibility, though, is that Emma Watson, the heroine of the novel, spirited and lively and bearing many resemblances to Elizabeth Bennet and to the later Emma Woodhouse, is yet a character too open and too fully developed from the start, and that perhaps Jane Austen couldn't find a way of stretching the possibilities of the character into a full-length novel. The manuscript of The Watsons is a treasure because Jane Austen is one of our greatest literary figures. After Shakespeare, she is probably England's greatest writer. We have no manuscript remains for Shakespeare. But here we have Jane Austen's own hand. A manuscript is like an author's DNA or fingerprint. It gives us precious clues to how she worked, how her imagination worked, how she evolved her scenes and her characters.